looking at the same graph that we just did using the table, I want to show a different way because this happens to be a linear equation. Currently, it's in the form slope-intercept form, which is, again, a very descriptive name because also called mx plus b, as students call it, but that is the form. It tells us what is the slope of my graph and what is the intercept of my graph. When we see equations in the form mx plus b, we will not need to go through all of this work. Other functions will not be mx plus b, and this is a never-fail way of graphing, but there's a far easier way when it's in the form mx plus b. The first thing I want us to look at, the first step, needs to be my y-intercept. When we look at this graph, go back to, remember when we talked about our y-intercept? Remember where that was at? That y-intercept was ordered pair 0, 3. That 3 is not a coincidence. Look at that 3. That 3 is that same 3. The place we want to start slope-intercept, wherever that number is, if it's at 3, go there. If it's at plus 5, go there. If it's at minus 2, go there. That's where the graph will start every single time, because remember what caused it to be 0, 3 was the fact that I was inputting a 0. Well, if I input a 0 for x, 0 times anything is always going to cancel out. Whatever that number is going to be 0 comma, whatever that number is. Well, let's talk about slope. Slope, if we define it, is the ratio of rise divided by run in a line. You can also hear it called delta y over delta x. Slope is a ratio. It is a fraction. Slope is how much does the graph rise versus how much does it run. If you want to think about slope, slope is actually steepness of a line. Is it really, really steep or is it really, really flat? And the way rise over run comes into play is if we got a lot of rise but little run, that's what makes the graph really steep. If we've got a little bit of rise but a lot of run, that's what's going to cause it to be flat. So this is what it does, bounces. How much do I rise versus how much do I run? Well, let's go back to if my slope, typically denoted with n, some graphing calculators call it b. If my n, the coefficient of x, is 2, well, remember the problem is slope needs to be a fraction. If it's not a fraction, we actually have to make it a fraction. To make 2 be a fraction, just put it over 1. 2 divided by 1 is still 2. I'm not changing anything. But what I have now is a rise divided by a run. So when we look back to this graph, we started at 3, put a dot there. Well, look at what happens. This says rise 2, run 1, meaning we went up 2 units, run 1. Up 2, run 1. That's an easier way to graph when it's in mx plus b, a far easier way. I do want to illustrate real quick. Remember that when I have that ordered pair, 3, 2, or when I have that ordered pair 2, 7, notice what I'm saying is x is 2, y is 7. I run before I jump. Over here, when I'm talking about a slope, slope is a ratio of how much does it rise versus how much does it run. I'm going to go up first because that's my rise. I'm going to run next. Those are easy to confuse as we get some of these early problems graphing, but just know what you're trying to do. In an ordered pair, I run before I jump. In a slope, I rise before I run.